that's got to sound horrible through the microphone.
Oh,
yeah,
shit,
I mean,
yeah.
It's just terrible.
I didn't think about that at all.
You've just blasted the viewers' ears.
Did we start?
With just horrible acoustic drumming noises.
Do we continue?
Yeah.
We have to.
Welcome to the 2021 Guangzhou Charge preview. Sorry about that.
Well, we've scared off all the fans now.
I didn't think.
About
my head was empty with that
You didn't
introduction.
think that we were recording your audio.
Well, I forgot that they were attached to so it would sound like the reverberation. It would just sound horrible. So apologies for that if you're a podcast
You didn't
listener.
think.
I didn't engage my brain. I have 2 brain cells. I've given one the day off because it's a snow day.
You rubbed them together and decided to bang the table.
I'm kind of working on half capacity today. You know what I mean? We're getting started with the Guangzhou Charge. And this team, I am actually pretty pumped for. I think that they have made some pretty nice acquisitions, if you ask me. And they're looking like a real, I'd say like, I don't know where I'd place this team roughly in my head, but I think they're going to be punching somewhere.
Why, Bren?
I'm going to
Tell
start
us
this
how you
video
really
off.
feel.
Oh, well, Avast put the Guangzhou Charge at number 2 when he
Number
2 in
in
APAC.
APAC.
Okay.
But even that, I mean, last year I was a Guangzhou Charge stan.
You were.
1 year ago when we were doing these, I had them top 4. I was talking about how
You were
incredible
drinking
they are.
Herbalife.
I was, but this year, I think compared to those people, and I think even compared to maybe your expectations, Bren, I guess I'm a Guangzhou Charge hater this year.
Because you don't like this team.
What?
It's not that I don't like the team, but I do not have them even anywhere near my top 3 in APAC.
I don't think they're as good as last year.
Oh my word! I think they're downgraded compared to last year.
Okay. What I will say is, if we make the obvious comparison, which is one of their best players last year was Shu, and Shu's not on this roster anymore. Kariva's in.
Yep.
They got Mando alongside him. The support line, I think, is in a position where you're just looking at it, and I'm thinking, okay, Mando, I think acceptable is the word I would use in terms of the general support play. Kariv as well has always been a rock-solid support player. I think he was the highlight when he was playing for, bloody hell. His picture was him in a Valiant jersey, so I'm confused.
Oh, you mean last
when he was
season?
on
Yes,
Toronto.
last season was Toronto, right? Yeah. He's always been rock solid in terms of the support line. Again, going to be competing with some very, very good support players in APAC, especially with the Fusion moving over there now as well. You got to keep that in mind. I'm shocked he put them at second.
Yeah, and he's not here to defend himself, so we're just bullying him all
I'm not
up,
going to go in on Avast. Poor Avast. He's at it worse than us in Texas at the moment because his entire house is shut down. Like he's got no power or anything. Poor lad. Anyway, keep him in your thoughts. The team itself, though, one thing that I think people are going to be underrating with this team, and I'll start here, is the tank line. Because I think this tank line has the potential to be very good this season. I think Rio, this is going to sound weird, but I think Rio, alongside Krong, I think they're going to be better than people are anticipating. Johnny's looking like disgusting. Well, I think the expectations for this team, for this tank line in particular, Rio's always been kind of like an undercover agent. He's just kind of like coming in.
Yeah.
He does a job.
He's the most underrated player in the league, arguably.
But people don't credit him with a lot of the success of the Guangzhou Charge in previous years. Whereas, what the hell am I?
He's like
about?
better stand one. All my homies, they love Rio.
But as well as that, alongside Krong, who we know is proven, I'm expecting this very good things to come off the back of this tank line.
But why are you expecting them to be better than last year?
Yeah.
Because last year they had the exact same tank line. So why are you expecting them to be better?
Can't give you justification.
It's nothing to do with Jihoon, because I thought you were just using that as a segue into you think Jihoon, he's a ball specialist.
I can't give you justification. Better than last year. I think I've misspoken immediately. Because what I really wanted to hammer home was that I just think Rio is underrated. We know Krong isn't underrated, but the point I really wanted to hammer home, and instead I really highlighted on the wrong aspect of the conversation, of the point I was making. But the point I really wanted to make was that Rio, I think, has always been very underrated as a player. And this season, that is going to be the strength of this team, is going to be in this tank line. Absolutely, 100%. Previously, you've had the very good DPS line. You had a very good support line that's accompanied them. But this season, it's going to be almost more pressure on them to perform.
I think I'm
think they're gonna be worse.
disheartened. I'm a bit disheartened because I think the knee-jerk reaction when we saw some of these moves happen in the fall, we're like, oh my god, what are Charge doing? Like, baby, please! Like, they just destroyed everything, and we're just like, what's going on? Like, just. But I've done my research, and I'm actually kind of excited. Not a vast level of excited about this team.
Yeah.
But I'm really looking forward to see this team play. I agree with Bren that I think the tank line is really solid. Like Rio and Krong, they're gonna continue to be like really good, fantastic, consistent duo. That's really gonna help them. But I'm looking at some of these other additions because when they got added, I was like, okay, I went to Sideshow narrative. And well, they lost some of their key players. They lost Nero, Shu, Char, and Happy. Like, how can they replace them? Can they do that? I kind of like the additions. I look at someone like, let's start with the DPS line. I kind of like what I'm seeing from Kaylee and Choice-One. Kaylee, okay, he's a formidable hitscan player. Like, okay, you guys keep lagging, so it's really confusing to talk. Like Kaylee, like consistent Ashe, like can bring some hitscan threat to this team. Like really can be a good presence in your DPS line. I would compare him almost to someone like BQB from the Florida Mayhem.
Yeah,
like he's able to get value from the hit scan position, like, and I like what I'm seeing from him. Like, he can probably take another step up. And then you have Choice-One, and I'm like, okay, well, Choice-One, you know, it's gonna be tough to fill Nero's position here as well. Like, I don't know if he's gonna be good enough. Where was going with this? I started off looking at the echo, I think, of Choice-One, and I was like, okay, well, he's filling this sort of like slower role. Like, I didn't see him go too aggressive too many times. So like, he kind of looked like a second DPS talent at times to me. Like he wasn't like a permanent starter kind of guy. But then I started watching more and more VODs, and I think what I liked the most about Choice-One, about his playstyle, was that when he then changes over to the Genji, he's able to adapt his playstyle to the amount of resources he's handed by the team in a very delicate and nice way. Like, and I think it's rare for some players to be like, okay, well, how do I change my play differently when I get more resources from my team? So sometimes you can see Choice-One when he's playing this Genji, like he's able to push aggressively, did a lot of like frontline kind of damage, like right-clicking as Genji and like dash in and be aggressive, that kind of thing. But then when he recognizes sometimes as well, when Kaylee is playing like this Ashe and like holding back, like Kareev is doing a lot of stuff in the backline, Choice-One is able to like bring down his aggressiveness and really play like a good, solid second kind of flexible with less resources. And that's what I really liked. And so I like the consistency you have there going with the DPS lineup, combined with the fact that you still have Eileen on this team. And then we can talk about the support line. But I guess that's sort of my cautious optimism about this team. Like, I like what I'm seeing from the new addition so far. And generally speaking, I'm very excited to see how these players perform together on a good Guangzhou team.
It's really interesting hearing you talk, Jonathan, because you're saying words I agree with, and then you finish off by saying, that's why I'm optimistic. Like, for example, you say, I think Kaylee's pretty good. Like, he's like a BQB, he could step up. And yet they previously, last year, had Happy, who's a nutcase. And then you're also talking about, like, Choice-One looking like he's all right when he's playing the Genji. When do you expect Genji to be played? In the year of our Lord 2021? He was...
No, but it was not so much about the Genji point per se. It was more about like how he handled like resources and like fill that role and how he's able to change the way he plays depending on like the resources. And I think that's a good standpoint from a flex position player when you're playing with the likes of Eileen and Kaylee.
But I would counter that by saying that he plays more Genji than any other hero, doesn't he? Like, this guy, I've seen him play Genji in metas where no one else is playing the Genji. Like, he seems like it seems like a comfort role for him that he tries to force rather than it being like representative of the rest of his hero pool. I think he's like most comfortable in that role. I just see this as almost a straight downgrade for this roster compared to last year.
I'm inclined to agree with that. I think I came into this with so where my mind was at when I was looking at this overall roster was trying to piece together where they would kind of be in place in comparison to a lot of the other APAC teams as well. And I was coming into this pretty optimistic, but now that you're spelling out the facts for me, it feels like I was just indoctrinated into a cult of just believing into this team almost. And now you're opening my eyes because when you look at the pieces,
I'm not saying they're bad though.
No, I'm not. I would expect this team to be mid-table. That's where my kind of general expectations are. But you can't deny that they have received downgrades in the support line and in the DPS line. Arguably, it could be yet to be seen that these players could exceed our expectations. But for me, at least, I'm coming into this with low expectations than the previous year.
Yeah, they seem similarly built, but I feel worse about a lot of the new additions than what they had. And I also think people are going to be like more. I don't want to say people didn't take them seriously last year, but I think they kind of like. They weren't a hot pick going in, and they kind of like outperformed it, right, and played really well. I mean, Josh liked them, but I feel like people are going to kind of be ready for what they're going to be throwing at them this year.
Well,
I
it's
don't
a weird
think
situation in APAC because some teams are looking like they're downgrading as well.
But I personally think that there looks like there will only be one bad team in APAC, and they represent Los Angeles weirdly.
Yeah.
And who knows what roster they're even going to have, which is mostly why I've got them at the bottom level. Otherwise, I think that region is going to be crazy competitive.
You think
and
so?
I think it's going to be wild competitive. Like when you consider the changes that the Charge have made this season, and then you contrast that with the changes that Spark, Chengdu, the other teams that were actually slightly below for the majority of the year, the Charge last year, like the people that the Charge was using to get up in the table, right? Those teams have made much better upgrades than the Charge have, in my opinion.
Sorry, go ahead. You were going to say something else.
Yeah, what I was going to say is the caveat to my point is that I think making this roster full Korean, apart from Eileen, who's going to be playing, well, actually Kaylee as well, but full Korean Chinese blend rather than having it to be Korean Chinese and English, I think has a potential bonus to them being more of a team, like actually working better as a team together, which I think we kind of saw a little bit of when we saw them play in the Nexus Cup. They seemed more coordinated as a team than they had done in the past. And the other major point that I want to bring up here as well is that Eileen fucks. This guy is amazing. And he's been penned in a little hole. He's been typecast for a lot of his career as being a Doom and Widow specialist. And when Nero
as well.
Sure, Sombra as well.
Yeah.
But when Nero wasn't able to play because of visa issues last year, we saw Eileen step into a much wider role for the team, playing Tracer, playing Genji, and he's so talented. This guy is the hidden gem for Charge this year. This is the person that I'm looking at to subvert my expectations. Because I already know that Eileen is good, but if Eileen can continue to not just be good, but be great, and maybe flesh out his hero pool even further, well, now it's getting to the point where I'll eat my words about the Charge, and they actually could be creeping up the rankings of APAC. But I'm not looking at the new additions there to actually move them up the table. I'm looking at Eileen to just do even heavier lifting than he was last year, and I think it's possible. When I look at this guy play, I think he has immense
He's fucking
talent.
sick. Yeah.
So I've got a little theory here, and I want you to entertain the idea a little bit as well. Would it be fair to say that APAC as a region last year struggled with hero pools more than the NA side?
I mean, what are you basing that argument from? Like Chengdu Hunters
the
playing a lot of like
inconsistency.
Wrecking Ball, New York sometimes having struggles.
The inconsistency.
Seoul also.
From so many teams.
I'm just trying to clarify why you saying that to like the audience, so like they understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But like, yes, if you look at some of these teams like Chengdu, New York, Seoul, Hangzhou, even at times, like they were sometimes inconsistent in different metas. I think you could argue that, sure.
I think also, though, NA just had more teams, so it's not as obvious. And
maybe.
they also had the Shock and Philly, who were good in every hero pool. So if you ignore Shock and Philly, it really was a bit of a rotation of those other teams coming up and down.
Sure, yeah.
Mayhem
Yeah.
looked pretty consistent, but they took a while to ramp up at the beginning. Paris took a while to ramp up as well, and then they were kind of either elite or decent, depending on what the meta was.
But for some reason, the reason I bring this up is because if it was just purely based on what hero pools were coming into it, fair enough. Some teams are going to go fade in and out of being dominant in a certain meta with hero pools. But it was just the general play, the fundamentals that sometimes seemed off from one week to the next with certain teams in APAC.
Yeah,
And I think you saw weird fluctuations for teams like New York, Guangzhou, Seoul, in particular,
yeah.
Seoul.
Yeah.
Like they were the most apparent example. Really strange fluctuations of performance. And when I think back to NA, I mean, there was a time when the Gladiators had a dip, but generally speaking, they performed at a mid-level. Like there weren't these wild, massive fluctuations of performance that we saw on a week-to-week basis, and I don't know why that is. But I think part of that plays into the fact that that's why, despite the fact that on paper they have downgraded some of these players, I don't know if it will be as bad for them because
I think the Charge will remain very consistent this season.
yeah. That's my hope for them, at least. That is my hope that the one thing that we'll get out of them is consistency this season, which will give them an edge, hopefully, in the APAC region. That's kind of the idea that I want to entertain. I don't know if you guys agree with me. It's a weird one.
I just don't think it's like enough. Like I feel like where you have a Philadelphia Fusion coming in who obviously like they were strong last year. You expect them to be pretty strong this year. Like New York's a little bit of like an unknown, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure
everybody's pretty high on Chengdu. Seoul adds Animo and Sabio B. Like this roster just doesn't scream like they added enough to maintain that number 2 spot. But maybe they didn't need to add. Like I don't know.
I see that's the thing. If you want to have a macro conversation about APAC as a region going into next year, I think a lot of teams are doing stuff, and you could argue whether it's like good or bad, but like New York is changing stuff up. We'll talk about Chengdu at some point, and like they've added a bunch of like exciting prospects. Hangzhou, like what the fuck, who knows what they're doing? Like they got some weird like Korean China project going on. Seoul, you know, they've added Sabiolbi, but they also like will they remain being Seoul in the regular season?
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of stuff going on in the APAC region, and like if you just want to compare Guangzhou to last year, yes, Sideshow, I do think that they've made some downgrades in those positions, but they brought in Arachne from San Francisco Shock. He was the assistant coach on that team, and he used to coach Talon in the Pacific region as well. Overall, has had a ton of success in his coaching career, and I'm very excited to see how he performs like as a head coach for like an Overwatch League team now. And I guess where I'm coming from when I'm speaking about the Guangzhou Charge is I don't necessarily know like how much better they have to be compared to last year to still have an impact in the APAC region. Because I look at the APAC region as a whole and I'm like, a lot of teams are doing stuff and not all of it is going to work. Mm-hmm. So when I'm looking at the Guangzhou Charge, it's like, sorry, what?
That's a good point. I like the point. Yeah,
so I think that, yes, they've lost a lot of key players, you know, specifically Happy, who was like insane at Hitscan. But I'm also like, you've hired, you know, arguably a fantastic head coach here now that has a great reputation and an achievement list. Can he be a great change for this team? And have you brought in like moldable talents for this team? And are you able to like be this consistent team? Like when we were talking about Paris Eternal, you mentioned that like some teams are inevitably going to crash and just like explode and not be able to live up to the hype at all. I think Guangzhou Charge, looking at this roster, I think that they could be a very consistent team. Like they could end up being one of those teams that like are able to get good performances because they're consistent and they're able to beat some of these shaky teams that are doing a lot of movements and a lot of like wacky stuff and are trying to figure things out. I think Guangzhou could be one of those teams that like have things figured out and they have an optimistic attitude amongst themselves, so a good coach and a good mentality. And that's what I'm looking at some of these prospects and I'm like, actually they're not as bad as people thought on paper when they got signed. Like they actually have their like individual talents and they could really shape this moving forward into being hopefully then as good as last year when you already had the developed talent in Shu and Happy. I guess that's sort of where I'm coming from.
I think that's a great summary because to me, I do think they're about at the same level as they were last year. I don't think that they're actually going to move downwards. But I don't think it's anything to do with them. I think it's just that they'll avoid some of the pitfalls that will happen to the other APAC teams. Like inevitably, we don't know. Again, we can't tell the future. We don't know which of these teams are going to boom. But considering the risky projects that Chengdu, Spark, NYXL, and in my opinion, Philadelphia Fusion as well, with like playing Mano and Carpe on the same team, which is, I still don't quite have it figured in my head. One of those teams at least is not going to succeed with the project that they've set out to do. And they will slip below the Charge. And I think you already have the Valiant pegged underneath the Charge as well. And so you've got like a fairly comfortable mid-table position in APAC for the Charge, as long as they can be consistent. Having said that, though, I don't really see them winning a single tournament. I don't think they're in the running to really win a tournament, unless Eileen pops the fuck off.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult. There's so much talent in APAC. Like, it's a wild region, but there's so much talent among those teams.
Yeah, I can see them winning a tournament this year. What do you guys think going from Shu to Kariv?
I think you've
taken
a playmaker.
Or is it a downgrade?
Oh, I think it's a downgrade because you've taken a playmaker, whereas you've got your tank line. You're not expecting massive plays out of the tank line of Rio and Krong. Very good main tank play, and I think very, very good. How many times can I say very before I have to find new words to explain what I mean?
Not very long.
You're doing good.
But I think Krong is very good.
Okay.
But the point I'm trying to make is
he was very good for a rookie, yeah.
They always had Shu.
Very rookie.
All right, guys, we get it. Make fun of Bren.
Much young.
Yep, very
fun.
Krong's rookie. Oh, yeah. We get it, okay? About as funny as Moff is nervous. All right? I not. But Kariv is not a playmaker in my mind. You would disagree?
I disagree.
I think on Ana. On Ana, this guy
yeah, actually. How could I forget that?
On Ana, this guy is huge.
God, yes. Ana is his...
Ana is his
role.
Yeah, and I think that he drops off significantly after that. But at least compared to the rest of the league, right? Like his Zen is still good, but is it an elite level Zen in the league? No, but his Ana is. His Ana genuinely is. Shu, though, had a top level Ana and a Zen, and I think his back was pretty damn good too. Though I think his Ana and his Zen were where he shone the most.
Yep.
So for me, that's the that's really the like key is that Charge are going to look their best on Ana comps, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Ana comps where you can get Eileen on his best role, or any role he can pop off on.
It's tricky, actually. I think the APAC region as a whole as well, I'm kind of pulling this out of thin air almost, but I think they do favor Winston comps a lot more, which can be the antithesis of Ana players in general.
Well, Double Bubble is very good for Ana. I mean, that is like a Winston Ana comp that works perfectly.
Yeah. I mean, it's good for and against, honestly, in some sense, because, I'm just going off of what I've been watching a lot of the APAC players stream and some of their general thoughts on the meta and other things. And that's just a general consensus going around is like, well, the reason Winston's being played is because they rate Ana pretty highly, which is interesting because normally it's like a bit of a map-specific pick. But yeah, I'm not going to get into details about that. Overall, though, yeah, I think I worded it very poorly at the beginning, but your point was just fantastic at just summarizing my feelings of this team, and you, Josh, as well, where just the consistency is going to be the key.
You, Matt.
Matt didn't really make any points. He just kind of sat there. At least you got rid of the M&M hoodie, you know?
I like my hoodie.
What are you grading this team?
What's your grading?
Are we grading them just in APAC?
Yeah.
No. All of our other grading has been worldwide. Yeah, it has.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, has it?
Yes, it has.
Okay, maybe it has.
We just haven't done any APAC teams yet. So, all right. Worldwide, in the overall 20 teams, A, B, C, or D?
Oof.
Are they like
that's tough?
Almost like a B/C?
Yeah, so you can say B minus.
Or C plus.
C plus, yeah.
Or B/C, that works as well.
I don't know if I would say B. Like, yeah, they have some pieces. I mean, that depends on like how much you value like Krong, Rio, and Eileen, in my opinion. I would almost say this is like a C plus, but like I think they could really like fulfill their potential. I don't know if I am perhaps a bit higher on Kariv than some of you guys. I think Kariv, I think it was rough for him on Toronto Defiant, and sometimes he had to be a bit more of a playmaker than he necessarily wanted, because like he sometimes like carried some of those matches for them. Like he just like the force of Kariv just like carried Toronto Defiant across the finish line. I don't think he has to be that on this team, and I think that's going to help his play overall. Yeah, I would say C+, but I'm cautiously optimistic because I think they got a good team with some potential going here, and they're bringing in a great coach, and I'm really curious to see how this team performs. I don't think they're going to be like the next big thing, but I'm genuinely very excited to see how this team performs because they got some exciting additions, and I'm excited about the Guangzhou dynamic with the new coach.
I'm going to say they are a C-tier team that will maybe be more like C+, but they'll kind of get... They're one of those teams that would benefit more if they were playing in NA, I think. Because APAC's going to be mega competitive, and I think a lot of the teams are going to take games off each other a lot, I think Guangzhou are going to look more mediocre than they actually are. Whereas I think that they are about a league average team. But I'm going to put them in the C tier because I think they're going to end up lower than that because they're in APAC.
They're going to end up lower than C tier.
I think so because they're in APAC. So they're not even going to get the easy wins. I mean, unless they just farm the Valiant all day long, they could win or lose to any. Well, actually, I would have them lose to a bunch of teams in APAC and only be favored winning over a couple.
Handful.
Yeah, and the metas are going to swing either way, and sometimes they'll win and sometimes they'll lose, but I think it's going to look very messy from the Guangzhou Charge. Not in terms of like their consistency, I think they'll be a very consistent team, but the actual win-loss meter won't be kind to them, I think, despite the fact they're at least about an average team.
I do. Even despite all this, I think I have a more optimistic outlook on Guangzhou, and I would anticipate them to be in that B tier. Maybe below B tier, but this is a team that I don't think I expect them to be skirting around the bottom of APAC. I'll reserve what teams I do think will be for another day. But yeah, that's my kind of general expectations coming into this, because consistency is going to be key. And that I think they will have. For reasons we've already stated. I don't need to repeat them. You've already seen the episode. You've reached this point somehow. Congratulations. Well done on making it to this point. Now the true podcast begins. You can be here for another 2 hours.
Does it?
Let the people
I'm pretty sure
free.
Johnny had to go.
Yeah, we do have to go. So,
do you hear the people sing?
Finny up this episode. Thanks for watching, everybody. This episode of the Guangzhou Charge 2021 edition. We're going to go walk to the shops now and see if one of them is open in this snowstorm. And yeah, we'll see. Let us know if you think we'll be successful or not in the comments.
I mean, they would know because they'll probably won't see this for a few days.
They might not know.
If you weren't successful, you probably wouldn't be alive. You wouldn't be eating. Yeah.
I'm about to go roll in the snow and get hypothermia because I think it'd be more fun than listening to the end of this conversation.
What do you mean?
End it.